Erikson's work for Psychology 2301, Professor Mendez, presented by Joseph, Kelsi, Meagan, Vivica, and Josh. A few of Erikson's books that have contributed to psychology include Childhood and Society, Young Man Luther, Identity and the Life Cycle, Insight and Responsibility, Identity, Youth and Crisis, Gandhi's Truth, Life History and the Historical Moment, Adulthood, Vital Involvement in Old Age, The Life Cycle Completed, and A Way of Looking at Things.
In this slide, we will be talking about Erik Erikson's childhood. So Erik Erikson was born in June 15, 1902 in Frankfurt, Germany. His original name was Erik Salomonsen, but since he was abandoned by his biological father even before he was born, his Danish mother, Carla Abrahamsen, had to raise him for 3 years until she married a pediatrician called Theodore Hamburger, who later on adopted him as Erikson. So then when he was given the name Erik Erikson, he had kind of like a sense of identity crisis and just uncertainty about himself since he was born in a Jewish household living in a Christian society. Though he had a Jewish background, other people thought he was Nordic based on his appearance, but he always hesitated about what his own identity was. This influenced his interest in identity formation, which ended with his exploration of identity crisis later in his work. The upbringing in Germany, a nation through politics and everything, he was able to experience World War I. And on his personal journey of self-identity, this is where his theory of psychological stages was developed. This idea underscores social and cultural influences in one's life, defining individuality during various ages from birth to death.
Erik Erikson's adulthood. Erikson went from reading psychoanalysis books to writing over 60 books on the topic. His last name was Hamburg, however, he changed it later on once he got married to Erikson because he wanted his own reputation and not his stepfather, who kept on pushing on this ideology of Erikson becoming or needing to become a doctor. Psychosocial stages. The first stage occurs at infancy, which is the first year of life. The basic conflict is trust versus mistrust. An experience in this stage that we all undergo is trusting or not trusting the person who's taking care of us, which could be our mother, our nanny, our father, our grandmother, and so on. If they do not show you affection or do not give you the nurturing basic needs of a child, you gain to not trust and not feel comfortable in their presence. Ages 1 through 3 qualify for the second stage, which is the desire of gaining the independence in many tasks, which is classified under Erikson as autonomy versus shame. Ages 3 through 6, whenever your parents give you the chance to make a decision, whether it's what game to play or where to eat, this gives the basic conflict of a child to take initiative. And the third stage is initiative versus guilt. Industry versus inferiority. Just remember, industry has to do with school, so this stage begins at school age 7 through 11 years old. At this stage, you begin to develop self-confidence based on experiences you may undergo with peers or classmates. And this has to do with the fifth stage. So if you have good self-confidence, you will have better confidence to experiment who you are as a person, which is identity versus confusion. Once you experience who you are as a person, then you go on to the sixth stage, which is intimacy versus isolation. In this stage, you begin to create relationships between the ages of 19 through 29. After that stage, then you begin to want to grow a family since you have the basics of creating a family set, which is the generativity versus stagnation and this is middle age, 30 through 64 years old. The last and final stage is old age, integrity versus despair. And this is when you overlook your life and you see what meaning you brought to your world and to the people around you. And this has to do with the virtue of wisdom.
So now we are going to relate the term attachment to trust versus mistrust. To start off, attachment means an affectionate bond the child creates with a mother or caregiver. Mother and child relationship at an early stage can contribute to the outcomes of trust versus mistrust. A couple factors that, can contribute to this is consistency of caring. An infant develops trust when caregiver consistently meets their needs like food, comfort, warmth, and affection, especially when they know that it's predictable caregiving to build a sense of security and reliability. The next one is emotional responsiveness. So when a parent or mother comes to their child when they see signs of crying, smiling, and just wanting them to reach out so they feel understood and valued as an infant. Next is physical caregiver. So this term means that when a child is crying, they really just want their attention and physical touch. So when the caregiver is giving them the physical touch, like cuddling, holding, and gentle touching, this helps promote oxytocin and kind of build a sense of bonding and attachment to the child. Reliability of environment. So this factor relates to giving them consistent routines and familiar surroundings to kind of help them feel confident in their ability to navigate and explore their surroundings as an infant. Next is availability and accessibility. So what this term means is that an infant usually relies on their caregiver for protection and assistance. And so if the parent does not show signs of caring in this stage, then the child will feel mistrust, and then the child will feel mistrust through everything because the parent wasn't there for their needs. Also, responsive communication. So if there is no verbal or nonverbal attention from the parent, then the infant usually benefits from soothing voice, gentle facial expressions, and eye contact to kind of convey reassurance and attentiveness from this factor.
Critiques on Erikson's theory of trust versus mistrust. Erikson's theory of trust versus mistrust has been without a doubt a very fundamental concept in the theory of development in psychology, mainly regarding early childhood development. While this theory has given valuable insights, there are some critiques that must be said about this theory. One point in Erikson's theory that is said strongly, however, is how much attention Erikson gives to the importance of the relationship between the caregiver and the infant, and how this sets the shape of the child's trust within the world. Now, while this is a strong point, without a doubt, Erikson lacks the emphasis on other implications that may lie within the child's early stages of development as well. There are factors like the child's genetics, socioeconomic status of the family, and even the culture of the child could also have a big impact in the child's early development stages, alongside its caregiver's relationship. A child's genetics contribute a unique blueprint to how the child may behave, or even how open or closed the child may express themselves. The child's socioeconomic status may give the child access to resources that others may not be able to obtain, and vice versa can also limit the child from said resources, depending on their social economic status. Additionally, the culture of the child can also shape the way the caregiver is parenting and influence their formation of trust within the child over the world. By expanding our understanding beyond the caregiver-infant relationship, we can gain a better understanding of the child's early development. By recognizing the complex nature of the human development and the multiple different factors that lie within the child's, like its genetics, social economic status, and the culture, can help us better understand and comprehend the child's early development. In summary, while Erikson's idea, without a doubt, is a great and fundamental theory for highlighting how important a baby's caregiver bond is, we have to remember that there is more to the child's early years than just this bond between the caregiver and the infant. As stated before, understanding all these factors and critiques, we can further our research within the development of psychology and in the childhood's development.
For the research on trust versus mistrust, I used a journal from the National Library of Medicine website. In the research, examiners examined a group of people's early experiences in life, like growing up in an institution, and how it relates to their ability to trust others later in life. They examined how well people perform certain tasks and how it correlated to their answered questions about trust. They found that ones that were more trusting tended to show more positive behaviors like sharing with others. The role of early neglect and deprivation children experienced formed them not to have a trusting relationships with others as well. Overall, the findings suggested that early institutional care is associated with basic mistrust and increased sensitivity to defection. Overall, they are trying to figure out how early life experience affects how much people trust others as they grew up and performed certain tasks and how they answered questions about trust. They found that people who were more trusting tended to show more positive behaviors like sharing with others. However, they didn't find significant links between other aspects of behavior and trust. But yes, overall, they were just trying to figure out how early life experience affects how much people trust others as they grow up.
Hello, I will be talking about trust versus mistrust with the real world overview. So a healthy reliance or significant psychopathology may have originated from this primitive stage of trust versus mistrust. Erikson thought that individuals become less dependent on mild or malicious forms of addiction, on self-delusion, and on arrogant preparation if they had a foundation of basic trust from an early age. A large portion of modern society is characterized by these dependencies. For example, some people may find our president funny, scary, mean, or caring. Kids tend to go along with the same environmental state that they grew up with. If they had a trusted and a safe environment, they are more likely to believe what their parents say, or vice versa. For example, if my parent says he doesn't like our president, I will be probably following in his footsteps, saying I don't like that president either. And now we'll be talking about how we are using this theory nowadays. People distinguish trust in their particular physician and in healthcare organizations because they are professionals, and as kids we are taught to trust them. Trust is frequently dependent on caliber of interposal encounter, which is what Erikson said. Trust and mistrust is something a person feels depending on what they went through, how they grew up, or society around them. Basically, you can't trust anybody nowadays. Everyone is trying to be better than someone else, and that's just the world we live in as of now. And here are my references. And that's it.
Erikson once said, "The more you know yourself, the more patience you have for what you see in others." This concludes Erikson and Trust versus Mistrust.